Attorney General Cynthia Coffman announced this week a reversal of her decision to get on the primary ballot by petition, saying she will go through the caucus system next month. Kaufman, one of a large slate of GOP gubernatorial candidates, is one of the few to decide to go through the caucus system. Eric, and my math could be wrong on this one, but it looks like her competition is going to be at the convention, Lou Gator, Stephen Barlock, and Greg Lopez. And with as much respect as I possibly can to give to those candidates, I'm a political junkie. I'm not sure I could pick them out of a crowd. So does she have a pretty good shot against this group, if indeed this is who she's up against at the convention?
Yeah, I mean, this is completely a function of Tom Tancredo getting out of the race. Tancredo was going to go through the caucus and assembly process. Cynthia Coffman was worried that wasn't going to leave enough of the pie for her to be assured of a 30% vote at the state assembly and get a place on the ballot. Cynthia Coffman strikes me as this interesting, almost anachronism. On paper, she looks like such a solid and formidable candidate. And then in reality, the parts don't quite all come together. She's been Attorney General of this state now for, 3+ going on 4 years, and has never really put together a substantial political operation, a first-tier political team, a fundraising base that is necessary if you're going to aspire to be the gubernatorial candidate. You need that fundraising base. She doesn't have any of that infrastructure. There were questions up until this move as to whether she could get on the ballot by petitions because she just doesn't have the money in the bank to pay the freight that it costs to go that route. You look at the competition here, the names you mentioned, Dominic, and you would think, well, it's easy. They have to vote for somebody, and Kaufman's the only credible one there. And I would assume she will get her 30%. But state assemblies are these crazy little test tubes where anything can happen when you throw a few chemicals in there. 2 years ago, we would have mentioned Darrell Glenn as one of those also-run candidates showing up at the state assembly, and yet he walked off with top-line designation out of the assembly, won a 4 or 5-way primary, came within 4 points, but not that close of a 4 points of beating Michael Bennet. So weird things can happen at a state assembly, but I'll leave it at that. But just Coffman, somehow it doesn't all add up to me. She should be much more formidable than she is.
Justine, a savvy move by the Coffman campaign?
Oh, absolutely. I think at this point, getting so close to caucus, it would be impossible to collect the signature, or it'd be very expensive. The ground game is difficult. I mean, on the Democratic side, I'm actually not even sure who's petitioning or caucusing on now, but I don't know. I've gotten like 7 calls from Jared Polis this morning alone. So they've been on the ground and they're still working hard. I know what it takes. So I think this is definitely, as far as strategy goes, the right way for her to go about this. And definitely with name recognition, I don't see her having any problem getting 30% at caucus.
Patty, this, as Eric mentioned, this is the same assembly that gave us Darrell Glenn, and who swept it. This was going to be, was it Tim Neville's nomination to get to walk away with, be coordinated, and Darrell Glenn took it right from him. Should Coffman be worried, or does she have the advantage here?
It's a smart move for her. When you talk about raise the bucks, petitioning is expensive. It's expensive if you're trying to do initiatives. It's expensive if you're trying to run for a state office, because as you know from how many times you've been hit up in your neighborhood, I mean, you can only sign once if you want to actually not rig the election. And the first people out there with their paid petitioners are going to get the signatures first, unless someone really has a lot of name recognition. But you still have to have the money, and I think Cynthia Coffman went for it. She's got enough name recognition. Maybe she's got enough of a ground game out there that she'll be able to get through the caucus into the state, and she could catch fire. I mean, it certainly is a better, more logical position for her right now than spending the money to petition on.
David, a smart move?
And a necessary one, too, for lack of money and time in part. But everybody I've heard from on the Republican or Democratic side seems to think she would be the strongest Republican in the general election. But then the question is, will she by then have built a campaign structure and organization, or will she just have to ride on whatever the party has? She is surprisingly weak organizationally at this point.